buffoon who hypes himself all the time. I'm not quite sure. I don't want to say what people should gain from this discussion. What I gain from the discussion is new thoughts about old topics and revisions to the ideas that I had before.
We'll move to a new theme now, if we may, and our first person is before me here.
I'm just going to stand so that you can hear. I got the sense that the something that's admirable is connected to notoriety. So I figure I must have an excellent life. But I just want to put a plug in for Elaine. I'd like to have Elaine for my friend. I think she has an excellent life.
Elaine is the gardener.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe all those people that she is working with in the garden club are growing food to give to the food bank. And so, you know, we have to be so careful, I think, when we look at someone's life and make that objective judgment because we could be way off mark. And half the people in my life wouldn't be there if I judged them on what was just like that. So. Okay.
So did everybody hear that, or do you need repeating it?
Summarize it.
Elaine's life, the speaker thought really was quite good, and she would be proud to have Elaine as a friend. And Elaine's friends may very well garden and donate food to the food bank or something of that sort. Right. I want to say something with regard to that. Of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, I didn't say that her life was bad, right? I just said it fell short by quite a bit of the excellent life. I designed it, actually, to meet the Epicurean criteria for a good life. The Epicureans would agree with you entirely. This person has gotten the stress out of their life. They are comfortable within, content, happy. So, I mean, they'd be lovely people to meet and, very pleasant to get to know. And they're fully enjoying life. The Epicurean would say, what more do you want? So you've got a group of philosophers, important philosophers on your side there.
So this issue of the Epicurean, to speak to this issue, or to speak to Elaine, and maybe even to speak to the whole view that she's engaged in beauty for Christ's sake. I revealed my Christian prejudice again. You wanted to speak to this one? Yeah.
Yes. You base your discussion about Greek philosopher or something like that, yeah. I just wonder why the civilization of Greek and Roman just practically disappear. You don't have a Greek in Greece, or you don't have a Greek Roman in Rome. I met some Roman in Austria. There was a 2,000 Roman, with the noses, and something like that. And and I'm just thinking, why they disappear, from the civilization.
That's a bit of a different issue and theme.
And not one on which I have any expertise whatsoever.
I have some. Greeks are just Western Turks, and Turks are Eastern Greeks. So they still are around.
Oh, I see, they're still around. All right.
They just went underground.
All right. Yeah. All right. Now, I think this is really an important issue because what is your name, by the way?
Rose.
Rose has challenged the whole idea that the admirability of life, or admirableness of life, is really important here at all. The question is whether, you're enjoying life. Now, remember, of course, it's not that there's any immorality involved here, right?
Right.
Right. The person is living a perfectly moral life. So that's a kind of a sine qua non for an excellent life. But beyond that, what's required? Well, it's just enjoyment of life in simple activities that have no great earthly significance. I mean, they don't, shake the world in any way. You mentioned notoriety, by the way. The Socratic philosophers are absolutely unanimous in saying that notoriety is a bad thing. That celebrity is to be avoided, right? If people do acclaim you, well, sort of be modest, take it in, but don't, for heaven's sake, go after it. They're all against that. And so I didn't mean to bring in notoriety as part of the definition of admirableness.
Okay. But right? I got that sense from your examples.
Yes, and I did that because I wanted to emphasize that they really had achieved by objective standards, right? Because if their achievement wasn't recognized at all, well, then you'd wonder, well, it wasn't really achievement, right?
But notoriety isn't just bad.
No, it's not bad, but the Greek philosophers all think that you can be easily addicted to it, right? If you start enjoying notoriety, celebrity, pretty soon you're going after it, right? And your whole life circulates around it in the way that Hollywood stars perform, right? So it's a dangerous thing to deal with, and if you can just keep it out of your life altogether, good. Right.
You can become famous for being famous.
I can't.
Maureen, okay, just speak up
I will
to this issue.
The notoriety can be a wonderful tool because of certain achievements or bringing somebody's attention to what has been done or achieved.
Right.
Is this incredible tool, and yes, it can be dangerous, for ego, but the objective of getting something out there is paramount.
Yes, you're pointing out that what she said was that notoriety can be a tool, a very useful tool for perhaps influencing people toward good ends, etc., that sort of thing. Now, I certainly wouldn't want to deny that. All these philosophers make a very important distinction between goods which are good for their own sakes and goods which are desirable because they lead to something else, or they facilitate something else, or they help get something else. And they would ascribe that latter kind of goodness to some cases of notoriety, right? But what they wouldn't say is that notoriety is a good in itself, something which you ought to seek just for its own sake, despite the fact that most of us, take a lot of pleasure when indeed we do become a minor celebrity, right?
Well, like you.
Thank you for that warning. I shall take that to heart.
Martin, I'm not quite sure how relevant these comments are, so I'll make them short, but I've been a bit uncomfortable that there's something missing in this discussion about how to live the excellent life, and what constitutes the excellent life.
Okay, could you hold it there? Repeat.
Yes, Tony is saying he's a bit uncomfortable that there's because he thinks there's something missing from the discussion so far.
What seems to be missing is any sense of the importance in people's lives of the whole idea of challenge, test, or crisis. Because it occurs to me that for most of us, or speaking for myself, life is not a plan to which I'm oriented towards a good life. It's not a project.
Okay, so he's saying that what's missing is any reference to challenges and tests, right, that people face. Yeah, go on.
Take some examples. The guy who goes on an Everest expedition to climb Mount Everest with a team comes across a guy maybe at 15,000 feet who's dying, who's been left by his companions. And even though it means he won't get to the summit, the guy rescues this other fellow, brings him down to the base camp. Or, another example, someone who's diagnosed with cancer, whose life up to that point may have been unexceptional, but once a diagnosis has been formed, becomes overwhelming with the amount of courage that they show to offer themselves.
Okay, let's take those two cases. There's the Everest climber who's presumably spent a good portion of their life preparing for this climb, and you know, the aim, of course, is to get to the top. And but at 15,000 feet on the way up, he encounters somebody who's been left behind and needs help getting back down to the base camp. But if he takes that person down to the base camp, he's not going to make it to the top of Everest. But he does the right thing and takes the person back down to the base camp. The second case is the person who discovers that they're suffering from fatal cancer, but faces their own mortality and with equanimity. Is that fair enough, Tony? And courage, right? Well, and keeps up a good face and tries to keep other people, his friends, happy during the course of the illness, something like that, right? Okay.
So what's my point? My point basically is that the excellence of a person's life is often defined by how they meet the challenges and crises in their lives, how they surmount it. And sometimes a bad life from an objective or outside point of view can be transformed and redeemed just by one defining moment in a person's life. And that in itself, in a sense, should enter into any understanding of what constitutes an excellence. People may live a life of a drug dealer, go to prison, and for some reason that none of us know about, turn around and devote the rest of their life to educating young people against that.
Yeah.
One last example. Karl Marx, in the volume of Capital, describes how the Lancashire cotton workers, who were mostly women, during the American Civil War, boycotted all the cotton coming in from the southern states, even though it was against their own economic interest, even though they were physically brutalized and made redundant because of that. It was a defining moment in their life. So most of us, in a sense, live our lives through crisis. Life isn't a project, life is often suffering. The Buddhists believe in dukkha, that life is a struggle and suffering. And it just seems to me there's something aristocratic about a lot of the Greek philosophers who saw otherwise. Aristotle was in favor of slavery, after all. So I guess this is a plea to recognize local heroes, the way in which they try to surmount difficulties. And this should enter into any conception of what the excellent life is.
Yeah, the surmounting difficulties and challenges you're emphasizing as important, and certainly I would agree that we find that admirable. Another point that you brought up, which I thought was really interesting, is the business about a transformative episode in a person's life. A person might have been living a really pretty bad, miserable, thank you, right, wretched life, if not actually despicable, but have an epiphany and turn their life around sort of on a dime, or just through some particular experience or challenge which is thrown in their way. What about that person's life? Can it still be excellent, right? And then, of course, there's the case of the mill workers, the women who are working in the mills of Manchester, who